I sit at my desk, fingers drumming lightly on the polished wood, the hum of the city outside my window like a distant heartbeat. The silk of my blouse slides softly against my skin, a tiny luxury I allow myself before the day swallows me whole. My phone buzzes. Another reminder. Maybe just another email, but the name flashing on the screen stops me cold. Dad. For a moment, I stare at it. My heart twists into knots I thought had long unraveled. The last time I heard from him, he was selling my future like a commodity, making deals about me that I couldn't even imagine. I smile. Not the kind of smile you show in family photos, but a tight, controlled curl of my lips, hiding everything underneath. Hurt, betrayal, rage, and yes, the tiniest spark of satisfaction. I glance around my office, the soft golden light catching the edges of the framed art, the sleek laptop, the subtle scent of jasmine lingering from my candle. It all feels like mine, everything I fought for, but for a second, the past sneaks back in, relentless. A message pings. It's short, cold, calculated. We need to talk. Your brother's mortgage, your future. And just like that, I'm back there, sitting in a room that smelled faintly of old wood and fear, a 12-year-old girl being told she wasn't even pretty enough to deserve her own life. I was 15 when I first realized my father had a price for everything, including me. The room smelled like dust and old leather, the sunlight slicing through the blinds in sharp lines across the floor. I stood in front of him, hands clenched so tightly my knuckles ached, trying to find the courage to argue, to fight for the one thing he seemed ready to auction off, without a second thought. Me. $472,000, he said, looking at my mother, or maybe just through me, like I was nothing but a calculation. Your brother's mortgage is due. This derangement will fix it. I remember my stomach dropping. My throat tightened. The words hit like a slap I couldn't dodge. You can't just... You're not even pretty, Maddie, he cut me off. No one will care. You'll be gone and life goes on. I felt my hands shake. My chest burned with shame and disbelief. And yet, somewhere deep inside, something flickered. A tiny flame of resistance I didn't even know I had. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind, soft but firm. Never let anyone decide your worth, Maddie. It's yours to claim, not theirs to give away. She had slipped me a small charm a week before, a silver locket, she said, held possibilities. At the time, I didn't understand. But now, holding it tightly in my pocket, it felt like a secret shield against the coldness of my father's world. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears that threatened to betray me. He thought he was powerful, untouchable. That day, I decided otherwise. I would leave. I would survive. I would build a life that wasn't for sale. When I finally walked out of that house, my suitcase heavy but my resolve heavier, I left behind the girl who trembled in fear. I left behind the father who valued numbers over love. I left behind the house that had felt like a cage. And I carried with me the faint, steady beat of rebellion, a whisper that said, one day, they would see. The first apartment I rented after leaving home smelled of fresh paint and fear. I had no idea how to cook more than scrambled eggs, and my old laptop groaned under the weight of the spreadsheets I was teaching myself to navigate. But I had something they didn't. A refusal to be small, a refusal to be sold. I found work at a tiny marketing firm, the kind of place where everyone assumed women my age were just assistants, interns, or mistakes waiting to happen. My mentor, Claudia Reynolds, a sharp woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and an iron laugh, saw past my thin resume and weary eyes. You've got fire, she said on my first day, placing her hand on my shoulder like a gentle anchor. I don't care what your last name is. You're going to make them see you. The nights were long. I'd stare at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror after 12 hours of pitching, revising, and learning, asking myself if I was enough. I stumbled. I lost clients. I burned through my savings faster than I expected. Some nights, I would clutch the silver locket Grandma had given me and whisper, "Keep going, Maddie. Keep going." But slowly, the fire caught. My first big win was a small local brand, Nothing glamorous, but it gave me confidence and, more importantly, cash. My first profitable campaign, a modest social media push, made me feel like I'd stolen something from fate itself. I learned to protect my victories. My family didn't need to know. I didn't post pictures of fancy dinners or new offices. I posted neutral updates, subtle accomplishments. I wasn't ready to confront the past yet. I was busy rewriting my future. Mentor and friend alike watched me blossom. Claudia pushed me, sometimes too hard, but always with belief. "Don't wait for permission," she'd say. "Claim it." And so I did. Small successes became medium successes. Medium successes became opportunities. Within 5 years, I had my own agency, handling clients that once seemed untouchable. I was financially independent, respected, and quietly powerful. Yet, every once in a while, I'd feel the echo of that day when Dad said I wasn't pretty enough, when he tried to sell me like a ledger entry. It fueled me, sharpened me, and reminded me that the sweetest victories are often the ones no one sees coming. The locket still rested in my drawer, gleaming faintly beneath the morning light. It wasn't just silver. It was a reminder that even in my darkest, most vulnerable moments, I had a spark that could ignite a life nobody could take from me. The moment they walked into my office, I felt the familiar flutter of control, the power of owning my story. Dad, with his sharp suit that somehow couldn't hide the arrogance in his posture. My brother, Jason, shifting uneasily, clearly uncomfortable. And my mother, clutching her handbag as if it were a shield, expecting. I wasn't sure what they expected. The room was quiet, but my heart raced like a drumbeat in a silent forest. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the modern art I had collected myself, the shelves lined with awards and books I had earned, not inherited. The faint scent of vanilla candles lingered, masking the faint tang of my morning coffee. I stood behind my desk, letting them take in the scene. I let the silence stretch just long enough for it to become uncomfortable. Dad's eyes flicked over the space, taking in the expensive leather chair, the minimalist desk, the framed contracts of clients he couldn't imagine paying me. Finally, I spoke, calm, measured, every word a quiet hammer striking stone. "Surprised?" I asked. They froze. "I'm Maddie Hayes," I continued, letting the name hang in the air like a declaration. "Not the girl you sold for $472,000. Not the girl you said wasn't pretty enough. I am the woman you underestimated." Dad's face shifted, confusion first, then something darker, like guilt rubbing raw against his pride. Jason's mouth opened, closed, opened again, words trapped somewhere between disbelief and shame. I leaned against the desk, letting my presence fill the room. "I own my agency. I have clients you wouldn't know the names of. I manage a team of talented, brilliant people. My net worth is mine. I built it from scratch." Mom's hand shook slightly, dropping her purse to the floor with a soft thud. She glanced at my father, perhaps looking for an ally, but Dad had no words. The numbers, the deals, the arrogance, they had all hit a wall, me. I held up the silver locket my grandmother had given me years ago. "This little thing," I said, fingers brushing the chain, "reminded me that my worth isn't for sale. And now, maybe it reminds you, too." I watched them closely as the weight of their own past actions pressed down on them. Dad's jaw tightened. Jason's gaze fell to the floor. My mother's eyes glistened with tears I could almost forgive. But not yet. "I don't need your approval," I said, voice firm but not cold. "I don't need your validation. But now you see me. The real me. The one you tried to erase." Silence stretched again, heavy and almost reverent. And in that moment, I realized the sweetest part wasn't the shock. It was the recognition, the undeniable proof that I had turned betrayal into power, shame into triumph. I smiled, gently, almost kindly, letting them feel the contrast between the girl they once underestimated and the woman I had become. The room was still, but the tension had shifted. They weren't standing in my office as judges or critics anymore. They were visitors in my world. And now I held the map, the compass, and the key. I'll help, I said finally, my voice calm but unyielding. But it will be on my terms, not yours. You've had a lifetime of old patterns, Dad, Jason. And Mom, even you. Dad's eyebrows rose. Terms? He asked cautiously, as if fearing the answer. Yes, terms, I replied. I stepped closer, letting my presence assert the authority I had earned. If I'm going to extend any support, there are conditions. Conditions that matter, not for me, but for all of you. I started with Jason. You will take responsibility for your own mistakes. Your mortgage is your problem. No shortcuts, no asking for bailouts. I'll provide mentorship, guidance, but the effort must be yours. He shifted uncomfortably, but I could see the first flicker of accountability ignite behind his eyes. Dad was next. I held his gaze steadily. You will apologize, not just with words but with actions. You will engage in family therapy, rebuild trust, and confront how you treated me. You will stop treating life as a ledger of people's worth. If you fail, I will step back completely. Mom's eyes shimmered. And me, she whispered. You will stop enabling toxic patterns, I said gently, placing a hand on the locket still around my neck. You have to support your children's independence, not act as though their lives belong to you. You must learn to respect boundaries and let us live without fear of being commodified or controlled. I paused, letting each word settle in the room like stones dropped into a still pond. If you choose to follow these conditions, there's a path forward. But understand this, I'm no longer the child you could manipulate. I'm not here to forgive because it's convenient. I'm here to reclaim power, set boundaries, and create a family worth being part of. Dad's shoulders sagged, an unspoken admission of defeat mixed with something like relief. Jason exhaled slowly, the tension in his body releasing just a fraction. Mom reached for my hand, tentative, like she was testing whether this was a dream or reality. I smiled. Not the forced, polite smile of a child desperate for approval, but a deliberate, controlled smile of someone who knows exactly what she wants, who understands her own power, and who is willing to guide others on her terms toward growth. The shift was complete. I was no longer at their mercy, no longer their bargaining chip. I was the architect of my life, and now, by setting these conditions, I was offering them a blueprint to rebuild, not as manipulators, but as equals. Weeks passed after that meeting, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, things began to shift. Jason started taking responsibility, paying his bills on time, attending financial counseling, even asking questions about building his own future. Dad joined therapy sessions reluctantly, but he came. Each time he admitted a fault, I saw a crack in the armor he had built for decades. Mom learned to listen more than she spoke, to support rather than control. I watched these changes with a cautious pride, knowing that real growth takes time, and yet feeling a deep satisfaction that I had been the catalyst. I wasn't seeking gratitude. This wasn't about proving I was right, but about creating a space where our relationships could exist without fear, without exploitation. Late at night, after the house was quiet, I often held my grandmother's silver locket. The chain was warm in my hand, and the little charm glinted in the soft lamplight. I smiled, remembering her words, "Never let anyone decide your worth, Maddie. It's yours to claim." That locket had seen me through trembling hands and sleepless nights, through bitter rejection and tiny victories, all the way to this room filled with tentative reconciliation. It was a symbol of resilience, of choices made and taken, of a life reclaimed from those who once tried to sell it. I finally felt the weight of freedom, not just the freedom I had fought for, but the freedom I had granted to them as well, by demanding they rise to their own potential. Compassion, firmness, and self-respect weren't mutually exclusive. They coexisted in the space I had carved out for myself. As I leaned back in my chair, looking at the city lights reflected in the glass, I realized how far I had come. The girl who was not even pretty had grown into a woman who could command a room, a life, and her own destiny. I whispered to myself, softly, almost like a mantra, "I am mine, always, and nothing, no one will ever take that from me again." And in that quiet moment, I knew the story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming power, redefining worth, and embracing the life I had always deserved on my terms.